You hear them everywhere, the ones who scream the loudest, fists clenched in the name of justice, identity, opinion, outrage. They believe that volume is truth, that noise is strength, that attention equals existence. But have you ever noticed? The most dangerous minds do not shout. They don't beg for likes, they don't explain, they don't justify. They walk into a room and the room adjusts. Because power, real power, doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And he also showed us something deeper, that the strong mind does not scream to be heard. It silences the world through its presence. This is not about being passive. It is about being so complete, so rooted in your own essence, that the chaos outside can no longer seduce what is sacred inside. Let's begin this descent, not into more noise, but into the echoing halls of silence, strength, and sovereign thought. Noise as a symptom of inner emptiness. Look around. The world has become addicted to noise, not just the noise of traffic or televisions, but the insidious hum of constant commentary. Everyone must say something, react, declare their stance, scream into the void. Why? Because silence terrifies the empty. When there is no fortress within, you seek shelter in the crowd. When there is no identity within, you borrow one from the trending hashtags. When there is no voice within, you become an echo. And Nietzsche knew this. He watched as the modern man, stripped of meaning and godless in spirit, tried to fill the abyss with slogans, causes, movements, but never with depth. The weak mind fears stillness because in stillness, its own hollowness becomes deafening. So it clings to noise and thinking that if it shouts loud enough, maybe it will become something. But the scream doesn't prove strength. It reveals the terror of insignificance. Why the herd shouts? Fear of its own thoughts. Nietzsche did not hate the herd. He simply saw it clearly. He knew that the collective rarely thinks. It reacts. And reaction is the language of fear. The herd shouts because if it stops, it might begin to hear the whisper of its own existential dread. It might remember its mortality, its lack of direction, its spiritual emptiness. So it keeps moving louder and faster, mistaking activity for meaning and visibility for value. But you, if you are to be something more, you must step outside the herd stampede. You must face your own thoughts without distraction, without applause, without performance. It is only in this sacred solitude that the seeds of true strength are planted. External validation as a substitute for inner strength. A weak mind needs mirrors. It lives off of reflection, not substance. Did they like what I said? Did they agree with my opinion? Was my voice loud enough to be heard? But ask yourself, why do you need to be heard? If you are whole, if your values are forged in fire, why would the opinions of the crowd matter? Nietzsche taught that value comes from overcoming, not from applause. And the strong mind knows this. It does not measure itself by external echoes, but by internal alignment. It speaks when necessary. It acts when truth commands it. Is not ruled by approval. This is not arrogance. It is sovereignty, the tyranny of opinion in a noisy age. We live in a time where to remain silent is seen as weakness, where not reacting is called ignorance, where every silence is misinterpreted as guilt. But perhaps this is the true rebellion, to master the art of not responding, to observe without absorbing, to witness without being pulled, to listen without the compulsion to speak. Because the world will try to pull you into its theater, assign you a role, hand you a script. But if you are strong, you will set the stage on fire and build your own temple in silence. Nietzsche never screamed to be understood. He wrote for the few, the future ones, those strong enough to walk alone through the noise and still hear their soul whisper. And that is your task now, to stop echoing, to stop performing, to stop chasing noise. Let your silence be so pure that it shatters the world's illusions louder than any scream ever could. The stillness that unsettles the world. They expect a reaction. When they provoke, when they criticize, when they test you, they expect noise, because noise is predictable, noise is human. But silence is godlike. To look into the eyes of conflict and not flinch, to stand amidst the roaring fires of accusation, expectation, pressure, and remain still. This is not apathy. It is a declaration of power. The world is built to rattle you. It throws chaos like stones, hoping to watch you tremble. But when you do not react, when you do not participate in the circus, you reveal something terrifying. You cannot be moved. And in that moment, the world, the loud, insecure, desperate world, feels its own fragility exposed. For nothing is more unsettling to the weak than the presence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Speaking through presence, not words. There are people who command attention without opening their mouths. You've seen them. They walk into a space and the air shifts, not because of their fashion, not because of their status, but because their being speaks. Nietzsche would say, become who you are, not explain who you are, not advertise it, become. And in this becoming, you carry a weight, a density of self that cannot be faked nor fabricated. The strong mind does not talk for validation. It talks when truth demands it, but more often it simply is. Its presence is its message, its silence is its command, and the wise learn to listen, not to words, but to vibrations. What are you saying when you say nothing? What world do you embody when you simply stand still? That is the true language of strength. Why true confidence needs no audience. The performer always needs a crowd. The truly powerful, they perform for no one. There is a common illusion in modern culture that confidence looks loud, bold gestures, aggressive speeches, theatrical dominance. But this is theater. It is the mimicry of confidence, not its essence. True confidence is quiet because it is rooted. It doesn't wobble when ignored. It doesn't seek permission to be. It doesn't need to be seen because it sees itself clearly. You know who you are. And if you don't yet, your work is not to shout until the world reflects you, but to descend deeply until you find your own foundation. This foundation is built in solitude, not performance, and when you finally stand on it, you realize the world's applause is irrelevant because you already belong to yourself. The ancient art of strategic silence. In every ancient tradition, silence was revered, not as absence, but as presence intensified. The warrior sits in silence before battle. The sage withdraws into silence before speaking prophecy. The mystic silences the body to awaken the soul. Strategic silence is not avoidance, it is preparation. It is knowing that timing matters more than volume, that power doesn't always strike. It waits, watches, calculates. Nietzsche understood this. He saw silence not as weakness, but as spiritual superiority. Only the one who can be silent has mastery over their words. Only the one who can endure their own mind can endure the world's madness. So when the world provokes you, and your instinct is to react, to correct, to defend, pause. Let your silence become the mirror in which others must face themselves. Because when used with wisdom, your silence is not retreat, it is a weapon. And in your stillness, you become the storm they never saw coming. The Übermensch does not perform. He is the world, is full of actors, each playing a role, father, activist, intellectual, rebel, wearing masks not to hide, but to belong. But Nietzsche's Übermensch does not act. He exists. He is not a symbol, not a brand, not a meme. He is a force of nature, silent in his confidence, untouched by the need to convince or conform. He does not ask, "What should I be?" He declares, "I am becoming." You will not find him preaching in the square. You will not see him chasing followers. His path is not marketed. It is carved in stone, with blood and without apology. He walks alone, not because he hates others, but because no one can walk his path for him. To embody the Übermensch is not to dominate others. It is to transcend yourself. And that transcendence is quiet, not because it lacks energy, but because it no longer needs permission to exist. Solitude and strength, escaping the herd's echo. The herd loves company. It loves noise, not because it's vibrant, but because it drowns the whisper of truth. But the overman does not fear solitude. He seeks it. He builds a temple in it. For in silence, the illusions fall away. There are no masks to charm, no crowds to deceive, only the mirror and what stares back. This is where strength is forged, not in applause, but in confrontation with the void, not in approval, but in the fire of one's own contradictions. Nietzsche saw solitude as a test, a sacred crucible where only the authentic survive. The weak mind, when alone, disintegrates. The strong mind, when alone, awakens. So let others post, shout, argue, let them fill the air with their borrowed truths. You go deeper. Strip away the noise, discover the self that does not vanish when the crowd leaves. That is where you meet the overman, and he will not speak. He will only nod, because silence is the language of those who have faced the abyss and stayed standing. The will to power as silent creation. To most, power means control over others. But to Nietzsche, the will to power is something far more divine. It is the force within that pushes life toward expansion, transformation, becoming, not domination, creation. And this creation does not announce itself. It does not need a billboard or manifesto. It simply emerges, raw, wild, inevitable. The overman creates values as a tree bears fruit. He does not ask what is good or bad by society's measure. He births new meaning from within. This process is silent, like the rising of a mountain. No fanfare, no debate, just becoming. And if you are to follow this path, you must learn to listen not to what the world shouts, but to the faint pulse within you, the will that says, go further. This is not motivation, this is metamorphosis. And it begins when you stop performing and start building, even if no one sees, especially if no one sees. Mastering oneself to master reality. What does it mean to be powerful? To bend the world to your will? Perhaps. But the overman knows. The real mastery is not over others, it is over one's own mind. To feel rage and not be ruled by it. To encounter desire and not be enslaved, to be misunderstood and remain unmoved. This is not repression, it is alignment. Because when your inner kingdom is in order, no outer chaos can dethrone you. Nietzsche's ideal human is not a dictator. He is a sculptor of the soul. He chisels his instincts, tempers his drives, sharpens his values. Not to be accepted, but to become unbreakable. The loud man needs the world to obey him. The strong man needs only to obey his truth. And when this truth is rooted deep, when every action flows from self-mastery, then, and only then, does the world begin to bend. Not because you forced it, but because you no longer need it. Media, politics, and the manipulation of noise. The modern world does not ask you to think, it begs you to react. Every headline screams, every notification tugs, every algorithm whispers, don't look inward, look here. It is not information, it is provocation, and behind it all, power structures that thrive on your distraction. Because the louder the world becomes, the harder it is to hear yourself. Nietzsche foresaw this sickness, the death of depth. A culture where opinions replace truth, where moral outrage replaces moral effort, where noise becomes the weapon of control. You are not being informed. You are being programmed, trained to live in perpetual reactivity, to outsource your thinking, to confuse attention with awareness. But you have a choice: to consume or to observe, to follow the noise or to rise above it. And once you choose silence over hysteria, you become immune. Not uninformed, but unshaken. Social media and the illusion of expression. They call it a voice, a platform, a space to express yourself. But is it? Or have we mistaken the performance of expression for the experience of truth? In the digital agora, everyone is shouting, but few are saying anything real. Every post is a plea: see me, validate me, confirm that I exist. And so we perform ourselves as curated identities, as memes of what we once were. Nietzsche would see in this a tragedy, the sacred self diluted by likes, the eternal soul traded for temporary attention. Expression without depth is just noise, and most of what passes for speech today is the ego screaming into its own reflection. But the strong mind does not perform. It creates, and creation is not always shared. Sometimes it is held in silence, like a sacred flame not yet ready to meet the wind. So let them post, let them shout. You build in silence, in strength, until the world no longer defines your voice, because your being speaks louder than any screen ever could. Emotional reactivity versus sovereign detachment. They will try to pull you in. Through fear, through outrage, through guilt. They know your buttons, they built them, and every time you react you give them power. But detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the ability to see the world's drama and choose not to participate. Nietzsche spoke of the eternal recurrence, the idea that your life, every moment, might repeat eternally. So ask yourself, do you want to be the one who flinches, reacts, rants, or the one who chooses with consciousness? The strong mind is not passive, it is selective. It responds with intention. It does not let others dictate its tempo. It leads, not follows. And above all, it guards its inner stillness as a king guards his throne. Because to be reactive is to be ruled. But to observe, to feel, and to respond only when worthy, this is sovereignty. Walking through chaos. Without absorbing it, the noise will not stop. The world will not suddenly become quiet, but you can. You can become a fortress in the storm, a cathedral untouched by the war outside. This is not denial. This is transcendence. You walk through noise and yet you remain unshaken. You hear the chaos and yet it does not enter you. Nietzsche's great man is not the one who escapes the world, but the one who stands within it, untainted, untouched, unbroken. This is your task. To build an inner world so strong, so deliberate, that the outer world cannot dismantle it. Let the world scream, let it rage, let it try to pull you back into the noise. You breathe and keep walking, because silence is not just absence, it is armor. And when wielded with awareness, it becomes your most invincible weapon. Cultivating inner stillness as power. Power is not in the volume of your voice. It is in the depth of your silence. The strongest beings you will ever encounter, you will barely hear them speak. They are not absent. They are present, so deeply anchored in their own reality that the external world becomes a whisper. This stillness is not natural. It is forged in pain, in solitude, in fierce self-honesty. You learn to be still by confronting everything that makes you tremble, every impulse to react, every fear of being unseen, every addiction to noise. And when you stop running from silence, you discover something shocking. It was never empty, it was sacred. Inside that stillness lives your intuition, your vision, your inner voice. Not the one that repeats society's scripts, but the one that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. Silence, then, is not absence. It is return. The charisma of quiet presence. There is a kind of magnetism that cannot be faked. It is not in your clothes. It is not in your words. It is in your essence. The quiet presence of a person who has suffered, who has faced their own shadow and not flinched, who has nothing to prove, is more powerful than 1,000 speeches. Why? Because energy does not lie. And we live in a world starving for realness. You don't need to shout to be felt. You don't need to sell yourself to be valuable. When you are aligned, your very presence becomes a message. So the next time you enter a room, don't try to be seen. Be felt. Carry silence like a blade, not to hurt, but to cut through illusion. Walk slowly, speak rarely, act only from truth, and let your silence echo longer than their noise ever could. Living without needing to explain, you owe no one your justification. Let that sink in. You are not here to convince the herd. You are not here to explain your silence, your choices, your growth. Every time you try to explain your truth to someone not ready to receive it, you drain your power. Nietzsche once said, The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. So fly, and let them misunderstand, let them mock, let them assume. Your task is not to be understood, it is to be whole. The more you evolve, the more your silence will confuse them. Let it. Because the final stage of power is when you no longer need to explain why you are calm while the world is burning. You simply are. The fire within you has learned to whisper. Be the silence that transforms others. You came into this world screaming, but you don't have to live that way. There is a deeper way, a stronger way. A way that doesn't need the crowd, the noise, the validation. A way where your silence is not absence, but presence amplified. So here is your call. Turn off the noise, the phones, the opinions, the false urgency. Step outside the algorithm. Sit with your own breath. Ask not what the world wants from you, but what is still asleep inside you, waiting to awaken. And when you walk back into the world, walk like a storm in stillness. Say little, mean everything. If this journey spoke to you, if something ancient stirred within you, don't stop here. This is just the threshold. The descent into strength begins now. Explore more, go deeper, and become what this world fears most. A soul that cannot be manipulated, a will that cannot be broken, a silence that changes everything.